Brad, Leonardo, Quentin, it's been a while. Hi, I'm Danny Quinn, and welcome to another episode of First Impressions. On today's episode, Quentin Tarantino takes us back to 1969 as Brad Pitt and Leonardo DiCaprio struggle to get by in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. The movie, as I stated, is set in 1969 and it revolves around Rick Dalton, played by Leonardo DiCaprio, a washed-up actor who's just barely getting by in stock villain roles on television after his attempt to make a film career for himself didn't quite work out. As he and his stunt double and close friend Cliff Booth, played by Brad Pitt, attempt to navigate an ever-changing Hollywood landscape, Dalton is faced with the prospect of travelling to Rome to shoot spaghetti westerns at the behest of casting agent Marvin Schwartz, played by Al Pacino. Although Dalton believes his salvation might lie in the form of his next-door neighbours, filmmaker Roman Polanski, played by Rafał Zurrucha, and his wife Sharon Tate, played by Margot Robbie, while on the horizon, the Manson family plots a treacherous murder as Hollywood's golden age comes ever closer to its end. It's been about 50 years ever since the infamous Manson family killings of 1969. There's been a fair number of documentaries made about Manson over the years. Manson himself has even been lampooned in a very early episode of South Park, and even very recently there's been a handful of films made about the Manson family, or at the very least inspired by it, including the likes of Charlie Says and Leslie My Name Is Evil, which both largely revolve around Manson family member Leslie Van Houten, as well as more direct on-screen depictions of the Sharon Tate murders, such as Wolves at the Door and The Haunting of Sharon Tate, which attempted to use the tragedy as the basis of a horror film, with perhaps unsurprisingly disastrous results. But to call Once Upon a Time in Hollywood a Manson movie would be a little inaccurate. I think it's much fairer to say that it's a movie about Hollywood in 1969 that just so happens to partially involve the Manson family as a part of the story. And since this is a Tarantino movie, it's probably not all that surprising to know that it isn't going to be exactly 100% historically accurate. I mean, Tarantino's the kind of filmmaker that ended Inglourious Basterds with Hitler being blown up in a theatre in 1944, a year before World War II ended in reality. But with Tarantino's love for film shining through pretty much all of his films, I was really looking forward to seeing this one in particular. I haven't really talked much about Tarantino on this channel before, but to cut a long story short, I'm a pretty big fan of his work. I love Reservoir Dogs, I love Pulp Fiction, I love Inglourious Basterds, I really enjoy Django Unchained and The Hateful Eight and the Kill Bill films and Jackie Brown, and I do think he's a generally very talented filmmaker. I pretty much like all of his films. I think he's a real skill for writing really sharp, really witty dialogue. He's also written some of the most memorable and badass characters over the past 30 years. And he's a phenomenal filmmaker all around whose knowledge of the medium and his appreciation for the medium has no direct competition besides maybe Martin Scorsese or Edgar Wright or Guillermo del Toro. But that's really about it. Tarantino is very much in a league of his own. And I think with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, it's a much more personal project for him. Not saying that his other films aren't personal, but this definitely feels like it has a lot more of his own heart and soul in it than his previous outings. There's much more of a sincerity to it. There's much more heart to it, for lack of a better word. It's basically his love letter to the golden age of cinema, and a reflection of the time period in which it takes place. And I think Tarantino does a truly fantastic job in replicating that. Like, he really captures the idealism, the innocence and growing cynicism of the era, and in typical fashion, it's filled to the brim with pop culture references, but it's not referenced casually in conversations like in Pulp Fiction or Reservoir Dogs, or done to pay homage to other films like in Inglourious Basterds. Instead, the pop culture is very much a part of this world, with lots of background references to films and shows that were popular at the time. For better and for worse, this is a film lover's type of film. Like, not just somebody who casually watches it, but who's absolutely obsessed with the medium of film, practically eats, breathes, sleeps and lives film. And if you're one of those people, a wee bit like me basically, I think you're really going to get a kick out of this film. There's so many great wee background details, in-jokes and Easter eggs that I honestly do think the film is definitely worth a second viewing, because I don't think I really caught everything on my first viewing. It's so filled to the brim with details and wee background stuff that I'm almost very tempted to go out and see it again. At the same time, I can understand that most of my audience aren't necessarily like that. I know most of my audience are probably a lot more casual about watching films than I am. So, would I recommend this film to the casual movie-going audience? You know what? Absolutely. Even if you're not obsessed with film, there's still a lot to like here, I think. In particular, it's two main characters at the centre of this story. That's always been one of Tarantino's biggest strengths. I don't think he's the most original or thought-provoking storyteller out there by any means, but like I said, he's always had a skill in crafting great characters, and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is no exception. Brad Pitt's Cliff Booth is an especially great example of Tarantino's ability to craft complex characters that you like no matter how flawed or amoral they can get. He's charismatic, loyal and helpful, and he's a great friend to Rick Dalton, but is also short-tempered and shrouded in mystery, with many people suspecting that he's a murderer. Booth definitely makes for a fantastic anti-hero, and another excellent addition to Tarantino's ever-expanding rogues gallery. DiCaprio's Dalton is easily more clean-cut than his best friend and stunt double, but he's still a drunkard and an emotional wreck regardless. He's feeling worthless and unsure of himself, and yet even when he's in these low-grade TV pilots, he still gives his performances his all despite his own personal demons. And it's an overall fantastic performance from DiCaprio, and well worth the wait after he won his Oscar for The Revenant. A post-Oscar slump, this certainly ain't. Alongside Pitt, the duo is a match made in heaven. The two make for a fantastic on-screen duo and have excellent chemistry together. They just click perfectly. You really do feel like these two guys have been friends for a very long time. As Dalton and Booth, they're both outsiders and misfits in an ever-changing Hollywood landscape, and despite their own respective flaws, they have a mutually beneficial friendship that gives the film an underlying sweetness and sincerity that, honestly, I've not really seen much of in any Tarantino film ever. And Margot Robbie is also sensational as Sharon Tate. I mean, she really does also provide the film with a sense of innocence and sweetness that definitely distinguishes it from some of Tarantino's other movies, but she's not exactly at the forefront of the film. She's pretty much a symbolic representation of the golden age of cinema, as opposed to a full-fledged character, which is a tad disappointing, and that's also something I could say about the film's portrayal of real-life people in general. The Manson family are pretty much portrayed as crazed idiots, sort of like the KKK in Django Unchained or any Nazi in Inglourious Basterds that isn't Hans Landa, which is definitely easy to swallow. But then you also have the likes of Bruce Lee, who's depicted as somewhat arrogant and overconfident in his abilities. He pretty much talks the talk, but the film makes it seem like he can't really walk the walk. Again, I'm not really sure how that really sat with me personally. Despite a good performance from Mike Moe in the part, and the scene between him and where the two square off against each other in the ultimate showdown of age versus youth, I'm certainly very mixed on the film's portrayal of Lee overall, and I can definitely sympathise with a lot of people who were really quite pissed off with how he was portrayed in this film, because again, it does kind of reduce him to being a bit of a punchline, and I'm not really laughing as much as Tarantino would probably want me to be on that one, I'm afraid, so yeah. And just like with Hobbs and Shaw, my only other issue in the film is its length, and at 161 minutes, this is a very long film. I know long running times are pretty much par for the course when it comes to Tarantino, but at 161 minutes, I do think this is a tad too long. And I do think there's a few moments in the film where it does kind of meander or drag out a wee bit too much. It's certainly not a boring film to watch, but I do think it could have benefited with a little bit of trimming. Not a ton, because again, Tarantino does like his movies to be proper long, but again, you could have still had that and trimmed out a few bits here and there, and you wouldn't have lost much. It would have still been the same film. Despite it all, I think the film does still move along at a fairly good pace, and it never drags out to the point of tedium. Not to mention, Tarantino's not exactly known for being the most subtle filmmaker out there. He's very well known for being quite indulgent and really excessive with his running times, his violence, and his language, and everything, really. So it is kind of a surprise that the first 2 hours of the film are largely kind of devoid of that. And then the last 20 to 30 minutes happens, and oh boy, it definitely feels like Tarantino being Tarantino, and I can't really fault the film for that. The climax of the film, it's certainly very satisfying, it's certainly very cathartic, and it's certainly quite violent, but it does kind of come as a bit of a surprise since much of the rest of the movie is largely devoid of that excess or indulgence. And I can almost guarantee that the final 20 to 30 minutes is literally the only reason why this movie ended up with an 18 rating, because it's really quite tame besides that. The last 20 to 30 minutes does largely deliver on the typical Tarantino tropes that we know and mostly love. I say that mainly because I do know there's a lot of people out there who really cannot stand his work, and I can fully sympathise with that. He is indulgent. He is definitely indulgent. I say that as a fan of his work. And yet, I've never really felt like his self-indulgence really bothers me all that much. I really don't know how to explain it, and I'll try my best. But I think it's probably because it's just a part of what he does. Also, I think I can overlook his excesses and self-indulgences because he's just a really fantastic filmmaker in general. Regardless of how you feel about his films, he does have a real skill and talent. Like, he's really good at building up tension and suspense and kind of playing around with the audience's expectations most of the time. Even though they're not the most disciplined or tightly structured of films out there, they're certainly the most epic and ambitious I can think of being churned out by major studios. And I can't help but really appreciate that, you know? Overall, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is a Tarantino film that... Overall, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is very much a Tarantino film that, while it's not entirely devoid of his typical self-indulgences, it's still a very thoughtful and sincere film, the likes of which we don't usually see from the filmmaker. It's still peppered with a lot of his trademark witty dialogue and humour, and it's filled with great pop culture references and little details, and I think that will definitely warrant repeat viewings. As well as being a fantastic character piece with excellent performances from the three leads, and a terrific ensemble cast who mostly do get their time to shine, even if they are largely in background roles at best. And the film's portrayal of real life people is largely kind of uneven, with Robbie's Tate and Moe's Bruce Lee really bearing the brunt of this particular issue. That, and I do think the film is a tad too long, but it's never boring or tedious, so I can kind of look past that personally. I do think it's the kind of film I need to think a wee bit more about, because I'm still trying to process what I've just seen, but I can definitely say this, what I've seen, I do like. I think I'm going to give Once Upon a Time in Hollywood a light 8 out of 10. I do really recommend this film, regardless of whether or not you're obsessed with film. Even if you're just like a casual moviegoer at best, there's still a lot to like about it. The characters, the writing, the acting, dialogue, the period setting, the production values, the soundtrack. It all comes together to make a very heady and personal and very soulful film that is just typical Tarantino with a wee bit more sincerity to it than your usual outings. And honestly, after seeing this film, I really can't wait to see what Tarantino's next film is. Is it going to be that Star Trek movie that he keeps yammering on about that he's going to do, and that it's going to be like Pulp Fiction in space? Or is it going to be something completely different? Who knows? We'll just have to wait and see. So Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, have you seen it yet? If so, what did you think of it? Did you like it? Did you not like it? What did you like about it? What did you not like about it? Let me know down in the comments below. Thank you once again for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, feel free to leave a like, leave a comment, maybe even subscribe to my channel. Don't forget to hit the bell icon if you're already subscribed, that way you'll be notified whenever a new video is out. And if there's anything I can do to improve my presentation, do let me know. I'm always happy to hear feedback as long as it's somewhat constructive. And if you want to follow me on social media or support me on Patreon or check out my website, links are below down in the description. And until next time, I'm Danny Quinn, and I hope you have a pleasant evening.